What's up, Locktubers? Welcome back to another episode of The Movie Shelf, where I take a movie off this shelf, review it against all the other movies on the shelf, give it a score between 0 and 100 to see where it falls in the annals of history as far as my film, my limited film intellect goes. This week, we are working on 2016's Hacksaw Ridge. All right, Hacksaw Ridge was directed by Mel Gibson. Actually turned it down twice before finally accepting the job. He did that with another movie we like to call Braveheart. It was written by Andrew Knight and Robert Schenken. This movie had a budget originally of $40 million and ended up grossing over $180.5 million. That's a pretty good return. War movies are usually more expensive than that, but this one didn't go on too long. I think a lot of war movies, they want to push the issue and they want to make a really super long 3-hour film. This one did not do that, and I appreciate it because it stuck quite nicely to the story and they accomplished what they needed to accomplish with it. It was nominated for 5 Oscars, I believe. It only won 2. Andrew Garfield, this was, I believe, his first nomination, and he's got many more to come because that guy is freaking fantastic behind the camera. I mean, he's just got a great look about him, and he's a fantastic actor. Mel Gibson was nominated for director, and it was nominated for Best Picture, but it won, spectacularly won film editing and sound mixing for the battle sequences alone. Amazing performance by those folks who put that effort together. Boy, there's a lot to unpack on this film. It's a true story um about Desmond Doss. Now, when I say it's a true story, Hollywood. So originally, Hal B. Wallace tried to purchase the rights to this film from Desmond Doss in the 50s, and he declined because he didn't want it to be a major Hollywood film. He didn't want any of those weird liberties that they like to take, and it's probably even more so than it was back in the 50s now today. But eventually, through time and not being alive anymore, he loses his kind of say on when and how his story gets told. So I'm sure that the writers had that in mind, but they still changed a lot of stuff. And to be perfectly honest with you, they didn't need to change a lot of these things because, I mean, maybe they did because the actual story seems almost unbelievable. I mean, it is quite unbelievable in the way that it's told as is, but when you factor in some of the things that I happen to know, just based on my readings, there's a lot in here that was changed. First of all, and I'm sure this is one of the things that would have bothered Doss. One of the liberties they took was to have him miss his own marriage when he was court-martialed or put up for court-martial. He was already married, so he did not miss that. They added that in for dramatic effect. Let's see here. What else? I mean, there's a lot of things, and we'll get to a major one later on down the road. When Desmond Doss was asked how many lives he actually saved, he said 50. Other observers said over 100. The number they settled on for the film was right in the middle of that, 75. But it can honestly be stated that over the course of his tour, which lasted approximately 3 weeks, that he rescued nearly 300 people. That's heroic in every sense of the word. I don't even know what else to say. Just thinking about 300 lives makes me emotional. And I mean, they did a good job in the film capturing that, and I love it. So good job. The war starts, and when he sees what happens, when Doss sees what happens in Pearl Harbor, he becomes almost immediately involved in trying to sign up. As within, he says all the rest of the men in his town felt the same way. He says 2 men actually took their lives because they were unable to serve. And so he signs up for an infantry unit. And he has to go to basic training before he gets there. And so he goes to basic training, and his thing is um that he's nonviolent, and he's going to save lives, not to take lives. So he enters as a medic, and he tries to make it through basic training without ever touching a weapon. Well, part of infantry training is weapons training. So that's where he gets into the problems with the legalities of the armed forces. And this screenplay was actually written based on the Terry Benedict documentary, Conscientious Objector, which came out in 2004. And this is one of the liberties that they took in changing in the film. Doss actually revealed that his nonviolence was inspired by a drunken fight between his father and his uncle, in which a gun was involved. His mother hadn't gotten between them. He thinks his father may have taken the life of his brother-in-law, and his mom got in the middle, took the gun away, and gave it to Desmond and told him to hide it. And that's when the defining moment of him swearing he'd never touch a gun. They don't need to change that, but for some reason they made him the one that pulls the gun on his father. It didn't need to be that dramatic. Just seeing that, knowing the kind of person that he was already, was enough. I don't know why. I mean, why Hollywood? Why can't you just tell the goddamn story? It's fine the way it is. Anyway, I guess I blame that on the writers. Um, let's talk about some cast members. Andrew Garfield plays Desmond Doss. Amazing. Sam Worthington. Um, I really like his character in this film because he plays Captain Jack Glover, and he's extremely hard on Doss in basic training, and then basically has a complete 180 in one of the most emotional parts of the movie when Doss is sitting there after saving all these people. He comes over and he goes, man, he's like, I've never underestimated a human being more than I underestimated you. He's like, I've never been more wrong about somebody, and I hope you can forgive me. Vince Vaughn's in this movie. A lot of people they used were from England and Australia, and the reason they did that was because if you have the majority of the cast being from those parts, you get subsidies from the Australian government to help film your movie. So that's why, if you are wondering why, it's all basically a British or Australian cast, with the exception of Vince Vaughn. That's why. And they filmed a lot of this in Australia. So that's where the subsidies come in. Help anything you can do to help get your movie made. I'm sure that's what they did. Luke Bracey plays Smitty Riker. I like his character too because he's another one that underestimated Doss, but was the first one to jump in the hole with him when he's going out to look for people. I do think it's funny that this is something that I just came to my head. Teresa Palmer plays Dorothy, Doss's wife in the film, and Smitty Riker, or Luke Bracey, keeps commenting on how pretty she is, and I just think it's funny. And for those of you that didn't make the connection, those two were in Point Break from 2015 together as Johnny Utah and Sam Sarah. So they were love interests in that movie. So I don't know if it's an intentional, like, haha, let's throw that out there, or if he actually did do that. I don't know that because I wasn't in the hole with those guys. However, I did make that connection. I thought it was kind of funny. Hugo Weaving, what a creepy dude. He plays a creepy dude in this film for sure. Basically, he's a slug throughout the entirety of the film, except for when it comes to Doss's court martial. He actually shows up and saves the day and gets them to, I don't know if that was true. I don't know if that happened. I would highly doubt that was true. I'll just drop some knowledge on you. The knot that Doss accidentally ties during training and uses later to lower wounded soldiers it's a Spanish bowline. It's also known as a bowline on a bite, and it's taught as a rescue knot since it can be used for exactly the way Doss uses it as a harness for raising and lowering someone in the film. I thought that was kind of cool that they incorporated that into his training. I caught a Wilhelm scream in there. I believe it's about 1 hour and 22 minutes and 8 seconds into the film. I got to call these things out, man. The Wilhelm scream, if you don't know what it is, look it up. I don't really want to waste time in this episode talking about it, but it's one of the most familiar sounds in film history, and it's free. Anybody can use it. So why wouldn't you? Anyway, 1 hour, 22 minutes, and 8 seconds into the film, you'll catch a Wilhelm scream. Another funny thing I noticed was Vince Vaughn says the line in here, well, Dorothy, looks like we're not in Kansas anymore. And I think that's funny for two reasons. A, his wife was Dorothy. Not his wife, but Doss's wife was Dorothy. But Vince Vaughn was also in Swingers by Jon Favreau in 1996, by the way. And he says the line, well, Dorothy, looks like we're not in Kansas anymore, when he's trying to pick up on one of the waitresses. And I just think that has to be an intentional nod to that movie. I mean, it makes sense with his character that he would be hold on to his Bible, but this one was given to him by his wife. I don't know if you guys saw this, but when she gives it to him right before leaving for basic training, it's bookmarked at first chapter of Samuel, verse 17, which is the Old Testament's account of David and Goliath. This story certainly has a similar tone where the little guy just beats the giant. So I like little things like that, and I like looking up and trying to figure out what things like that mean in films. Like obvious, this one was obvious. As soon as I saw what the chapter and verse was, I was like, all right, makes sense. Mel Gibson was originally supposed to play the part that went to Vince Vaughn, but he found it too distracting to be in the movie as well as doing a proper job of directing it. I believe his last entry into the battlefield was on May 21 in a night attack on high ground near Shuri. He remained in exposed territory while the rest of his company took cover, like fearlessly risking the chance that he would be mistaken for an infiltrating Japanese and giving aid to injured people, as he was himself seriously wounded in the legs by the explosion of a grenade. That's how his time there came to an end. So rather than call for the aid of another medic, he cared for his own injuries, and then he waited 5 hours before a little bearers reached him and started carrying him to cover. Now, this is what the entire final scene of the film is predicated on. There was 2 men who found him, and they were bringing him back, and the trio was caught in an enemy tank attack. And Doss, seeing a more critically wounded man nearby, crawled off of the stretcher and directed the bearers to give their first attention to the other man. He said he would wait for them to come back. And while he's waiting, he gets struck again, this time suffering a compound fracture of his arm. direct shot. Now in the film, they just show him get on a he's got some injuries. They show him getting on a stretcher and coming back. But just knowing that this man like had already saved over 300 people's lives, and he's still, leave me here, take him, I'll wait. Part of me is like, how heroic are you willing to be? I mean, you do have a wife at home who will miss you dearly. You've done everything that and more than anybody's ever done for the country. What's left? And the real Doss is quoted as saying, every time he got one, he'd be like, Lord, help me find one more. Lord, let me get one more. So he really went into this just determined to die getting as many people saved as he possibly could. Unfortunately, or fortunately, really, his injuries at that time made him a candidate to return home alive, well, where he lived out the rest of his days until I believe he died at 87 years old. Now there's some shitty things that happened, like his wife in real life, Dorothy, she died due to complications from a car accident. That's not cool, but that's one of the things that happens when you live a long time, I guess. Yeah, so I want to go back to him lying there waiting for them to return. He gets hit again and he gets the wound on his arm. He actually did pick up a weapon at that point, but he used it as a splint for his arm. And then he crawled 300 yards to the terrain of that terrain to the aid station where he could be rescued. So he didn't actually wait for them to come back. He did decide, all right, I'm gonna get myself to safety, and he did. And then he was, the final scene in this film is beautiful. And you actually have an appearance from Mel Gibson. I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but one of the men in the last scene where they're pulling him to the stretcher right before he goes down the new thing that they've set up. It's basically a pulley line with a stretcher, and it's beautiful cinematography in that scene. Maybe a little bit overstated, kind of looks J.J. Abramish with the lens flares and everything, but it's a beautiful shot. Mel Gibson appears as one of the guys that's there at the end. There's 3 or 4 guys after he gives them the Bible. He doesn't have any lines or anything, but you'll recognize Mel Gibson's face if you watch it, I promise. And then he gets lowered, knowing that he's going home. And that's when you finally can exhale as a viewer of this film, because you're like, he made it. If you aren't familiar with the story beforehand, you may not have known that he made it. You might have thought that he died. Time to rate this film. So here we go. Hacksaw Ridge 2016 is going to be, for me, an 81.5, and that's good enough to just sneak into the top 10 at number 10 on the list. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope it brought you some kind of information. And if you haven't seen the film, please check it out. Remember, you guys, I'm doing these based on your guys' requests. Even if it's not on the movie shelf, if it's on the movie shelf, I'll show you. If it's not, this movie needs to be on my shelf. It really does. There's got to be a 4K out there. I'm going to go look for it. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please like. If you're watching these shows, more than 1 or 2 or 3, thank you so much. But you should also please be subscribed to our channel. Until next episode. Oh, one more thing. You guys tired of this yet? Say goodbye to it. I actually, since we do movies, I'm playing a role in a film tomorrow in which I'm a missing person, so I've had to grow this out, and I can't wait to get rid of it because it drives me nuts every time I look at the screen. So if you see me looking off, it's because I'm tired of looking at my own face. Anyway, thank you guys for watching the movie shelf. Until next time, ciao.